The Golden Stallion is on the case, baby. It is time for your February live Hangout Q&A. And I know this one came as a bit of a surprise. It was kind of like a last minute plan. We're like, okay, you know what? We're going to get this in on February 1st. It's good. I kind of have a crazy weekend ahead of me. I was thinking about doing it Sunday, but then I was like, no, this is when we can fit it in. So anyway, I hope a lot of people are able to join. If not, I completely understand why you weren't able to make it, because it was very quick. Usually I give you at least a few days advance notice, maybe even a week or two advance notice. But anyway, this is your February 1st Sovryn Tech Patreon or patron only Hangout Q&A. And of course, please feel free to ask questions in the YouTube live chat if you want. Some people often will join in and hang out yourself. And actually, looks like we got somebody joining in right now. So we got Daniel in. If he wants to start chatting it up, he's welcome to do so. If not, he looks like he's ready to go. Daniel, how's it going, man?
Going well. It's been a while. Seems like at least 2 or 3 months I haven't managed to make the Hangout, so I'm glad I could today.
Yeah, glad you're back on it, man. I love that biblical question you asked the other day. That's a doozy.
Well, it is, and actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that like reincarnation is a thing.
Yeah.
Because some theories have it that he was actually the reincarnation of Eve, like Adam and Eve.
Okay, that's one I haven't heard, but that I'd have to think on that. Okay.
I mean, bullshit if you ask me, but but
Sure.
Where does the bullshit start and where does the bullshit end? So might as well if you're already in.
I'll admit
to anyone who believes, but.
Yeah, I mean, like I've read a lot of Kabbalistic texts and everything, and that was always the one where like my brain just would stop. Like as soon as it started talking about reincarnation, I'm like,
Yeah.
Even when I was a little more amenable to those kinds of ideas, but that was a long time ago. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of Adam and Eve, I heard a story not too long ago about like someone basically trying to square that circle in terms of like what the deal is. Why do we have like two creation myths, and why do we have like what how does God create a perfect world and a perfect universe, and then like an hour after he creates Adam and Eve, Adam goes and eats from the forbidden tree, fruit, whatever it's called.
Right.
And does that not show that he fucked up his design, or at least the implementation of it? And basically, the interesting story there is that that God created, and also the conundrum of like, well, if you only had Adam and Eve and they had Cain and Abel, they only had 2 sons. How the heck do we get like all the rest of the world's population? So the actual story, if you choose to believe this story, is that he created Gan Eden. He created the place where Adam and Eve were created, but basically created the world, and he brought with the intention of bringing the earthly world into like to a holy place, but you can't just, I don't know exactly, I'm gonna ramble a little because I just don't understand the internal logic here, but
sure.
I'll try. But basically you have to kind of like bring it up to the heavens. Human beings have to be the change agent. So he created Adam and Eve, and he said on one hand, don't eat from like the verse in the Bible. I obviously don't know what it is in English, but the translation from Hebrew, the verse in the Bible is that don't eat from the Pri Etzadat, the fruit of the tree, the forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
And then the next part of the thing is when you eat from it, you will die. And in English, you have a distinction between if you eat from it, you will die, and when you eat from it, you will die. But in Hebrew, it's the same word. It's like when you eat from it, you will die. And so it's obviously a little bit ambiguous as to what do they actually mean. Do they mean, don't eat from it, or when you eat from it, implying that God already knows that they will eat from it? So it's kind of like God saying, this is what I want you to do. I want you to not to eat from it, or at least on the surface of it, I want you not to eat from it. But I also know that you're going to eat from it. So just so you know, this is what's going to happen when you eat from it. So it's kind of like saying you can eat from it and you don't have to eat from it. And eating from it is basically the intention of, getting away from sort of the Gan Eden, it's not really heaven, the Garden of Eden. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's the way for them to go from the Garden of Eden to the earthly place of earth, right? Mm-hmm. You have to volunteer. You have to want to do that, because you're going to be, a woman is going to labor for 9 months and it's going to be painful, and you're going to die, and you're going to have to toil all of your life and all of that stuff. This is not something that I'm just going to throw Adam and Eve straight into without asking them. They have to want to volunteer to do it.
Right.
So Eve knew that that's what it was, so she said, "Well, let's do it." And Adam's like, "Well, why the fuck will I want to do that? I'm pretty happy over here." And she convinced him and whatever. And so obviously without Eve, none of this would have happened. And it was and then God, they ate from it, and God asked him, "What did you do?" And obviously God knows, but the reason he asked Adam, what did you do? Why did, he wanted Adam to admit that, he did it. And he said, he asked him, who told you to do it? And again, not because he didn't know, but because he wanted to admit to Adam that he needed to have Eve explain to him that they needed to do it, which goes to the sort of the second story where Adam is told, or someone is told, that it's not good for a man to be by himself. So kind of an explanation as to why Adam needed Eve. And then the thing is that once they've decided that this is what they're going to do, they'll eat from the forbidden fruit, they can now go down to the earthly earth, which is presumably where all the other people are. So it's not that everyone is derived from Adam and Eve, but they go down to the earthly earth and they start their mission to basically whatever.
Yeah. So or do you have more? Keep going.
I don't know where that story ends, but
sure.
And that really wasn't my question anyway. But whatever, it was just an interesting kind of.
Yeah, well, I want to touch on that for a minute, and then you can get to your actual question. Unless you're pressed for time, if you want to ask your question first, go ahead. Okay. All right. Yeah. So in a couple interesting things. One is that, right, if the Garden of Eden actually isn't on the earthly earth, that explains more what happens to Abel, right? Where suddenly he finds a bunch of people. Who the hell did he go to? When it says that he went to the land of Nod. Which, that can explain that a little better. There's a lot of different, just within Judaism alone, there's a lot of different interpretation as far as what exactly happened there. What is the difference with the two creation stories? Probably the most popular midrash is, again, the idea of Lilith, that actually he had a wife before, and the wife, really the difference isn't that God's different in chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Bereshit, but actually the woman is different. Originally it's Lilith in chapter 1, and then in chapter 2 it's actually Eve. But that gets into a whole other thing too. But you raise an interesting point about with Hebrew, how you don't, past, present, and future tense don't always gel, and it doesn't, you can translate it in English in a bunch of different ways. Now, in the 19th century, there was a guy named Robert Young who he did what's called Young's literal translation of the Bible, where he went hyper literal with all of the translation of, it was Old Testament and New Testament for him. He was Christian. And the Tanakh reads very strange in that, because the tenses aren't there. Now he's being accurate. Robert Young was being accurate in how he was translating it. And you run into exactly what you talked about, which that verse in Genesis where, you shall not eat from the, the tree of knowledge or whatever. which that's a huge verse in itself, because like that's where you get the entire Noahide religion that a lot of people don't know about. But yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of great points, and that there are alternative, interpretations to a lot of this stuff, and it's not necessarily like things that, I mean, people have considered some of this in the past. But anyway, your actual question, if you want to rock that.
Well, actually, so regarding hyper literal translations, there's a statue in Italy somewhere, and I obviously don't know exactly what it is, but it was built in sort of the Renaissance time, I think, and I believe it's Moses, and he has kind of like horns coming out of his head, and the reason is because in the Bible it says that his face was glowing, because he was so happy, but the glowing is, the word for it is, horns coming out. So it's kind of, because it looks kind of like horns when the sun.
Yeah,
so,
but it was a sign of wisdom.
But they kind of made it hyper literal. And actually, by the way, also with regards to sort of a bit further in terms of reconciling different creation stories, like part of the, because you were talking actually, I don't know if you actually mentioned it in one of the recent ones about the Book of Job. And I'm sure you mentioned it at some point in the past as well, but the Book of Job maybe chronologically talks about a time, after Genesis, but, historically when the book was actually written is before Moses went on Mount Sinai. So technically, the book was written before the Genesis and whatever was written. Right. So the Book of Job, actually, like towards the end of the Book of Job, Job is like trying to, ask God, what the hell, why'd you do all of this shit to me? And God is basically, after he already speaks to all of his friends, that's when God comes in and starts talking to him. And basically most of what God is saying is he's kind of like bullying him to say, look what I did, and look at all of my creations. And he just basically describes in very great detail nature and the world and all of his creations, basically in a way to say, yeah, could you do any better? And, to kind of put things in perspective, to say, yeah, maybe your life stinks, but look at what I'm dealing with over here. I've got the entire world to deal with, and you can't know exactly what I'm doing. But in the way that he's saying it, he's actually providing a lot of descriptions about all of his creations. And there are a lot of sort of missing things that we're not kind of told in the book of Genesis. And the idea is that, well, everyone knew about those things already because there was a book written with all of these details, 1,000 years prior to that. So, or however many years prior to that, then so Moses or God didn't need to, dictate to Moses all of these other things because it would just be repetitive.
I mean, that gets into weird territory because, like Adam and Eve, the weird part about that is that outside of the Pentateuch, and even barely within that, outside of the book of Genesis, in the in the Tanakh, I mean, they almost never get mentioned again. Like, I mean, they're just never talked about. It's such an odd. I mean, you'd think it'd be the one thing you'd want to talk about, like the pure what mankind was like in its purest form. You think you'd keep talking about it as this is the goal, and you just never ever get it really again. It's strange, including in the book of Job. I mean, my personal opinion is that the book of Job is something else. Like it's some other, I don't know, maybe a Canaanite religion or something, but that comes from I think that's a totally separate animal, no pun intended, because it's just, it doesn't mention enough and it's too different. I don't know. I mean, granted, when we find it in the Hebrew and so on, I mean, it matches up with writing styles, I guess, but that doesn't mean it was originally Hebrew, So anyway, that's just my thought on Job, but yeah, good point. Yeah.
Well, my actual question, far less interesting, I don't know, was just I read recently a news an article about North Korea hacking something else. There's always some kind of hack involving North Korea, whether it's mining crypto or whether it's whatever. The most recent one is that now they're targeting civilian commercial companies, and something, I don't know, like North Korea is such a tragic situation. Like the people of North Korea obviously being the biggest victims in this entire story. it's it's such a poor and like depressed from populace,
Yeah.
uneducated, unaware of what's going on around them. Like, where do they get the hacking talent to, like, how do you get like North Koreans who even know what a computer is, let alone are able to, hack the most sophisticated, companies in the quote unquote Western world? Like, where does this come from? Or is this some kind of like, I don't want to put my conspiracy hat on just, for the sake of it, but like, there is an awful lot of blaming of North Korea, and I just don't understand, like, where all of a sudden, like, they're a bigger tech powerhouse than Israel or than Silicon Valley. It's just like this, something doesn't quite sit right there, and I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that was.
Sure. Yeah, I'll put the conspiracy hat on for you, because I mean, it doesn't make, you can't go saying that this is some, for colloquialism, just some backwater shit town. You can't go say that and then tell us that, oh, they can hack into the most sophisticated systems that even the NSA would have a hard time doing. Like, that narrative doesn't hold up. You can't tell us that their leader or their past leader, was in awe and amazed by an iPod, had never seen anything like it, but yet then they have some kind of, like hacking team that is this crack hacking team that can do things that apparently China can't even do. I mean, like, the narratives just don't line up. I think that there are a lot. I mean, granted, I don't exactly have the evidence for this, but here's the hard part with cybersecurity. I mean, like, the first game of securing yourself, of doing your, just personal security right, is, doing things like hiding your Mac ID, hiding like a bunch of different, that basically tells you where you came from, where your packets and everything are coming from, and hiding who you are. Like, that's just basic anonymity that everybody should be engaging in, and there's plenty of easy tools to be able to do that. So, to say, I mean, it's always specious for me, and I know that there are more advanced tools and other metadata that you can collect to kind of put all this, to put a picture together, but I always have a very hard time believing that anybody, I don't care if it's the NSA, any other state actor, when they come out and they say, no, we know who did this, we have the evidence here, and especially oftentimes they don't give you a full detailed report like Chris Sagoyan or or Troy Hunt would, where they give you this all the numbers, the whole thing. They never give us all that, and they just want us to more or less trust them. No, that was Russia. No, that was North Korea. And I don't believe it. I mean, you have to have boogeymen, and again, now granted, Russia does have the technical prowess, to pull off a lot of what's talked about. I'm not saying that they don't, but also it's just too easy. It's too easy to just like say, yeah, we think it's the Russians, or yeah, it's North Korea, or like with the Sony hack, I mean, Sony, the incentives are far more to just blame somebody else than to admit that, oh shit, somehow we fucked up internally. And I mean, it's supposition, granted, but I don't think they have the evidence to really prove that it's North Korea or Russia at any given moment. So really my supposition is, I think, just about as good as what they've got. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't make sense. And it's almost like, here's a front, it's an easy thing to hack a North Korean, DNS or whatever. And as far as North Korea goes, I mean, they're not going to deny it because it makes them look powerful or whatever. So they're like, yeah, I didn't get whatever it was that was hacked, but I certainly get the street cred for it. So
it's the same old, there's no such thing as bad press. So like North Korea's like, yeah, sure, fine. Of course I
blame me. I don't care.
Right. That'd be like me. It's like, oh yeah, I saw Brian Sovryn using an orgy or something like that. I wasn't, but okay. What the hell? I mean, anything that makes me sound hotter, great. I'll take it. So yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I really didn't have too much more to say.
No, sure. No, that's fair.
I was just curious whether this was a well-known thing that somehow I missed, or whether people are still kind of believing this shit.
Yeah, I think in general people are, but that's because most people don't know like the first thing about how computers work. For them, I mean, they've fallen into, Apple's spell where it's all just magic. And I think most security researchers are very, very skeptical of this sort of stuff, when these kind of claims come out. Even the ones against Russia and so on, I think that there's a lot of skepticism that goes along with that. So anyway.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, no, but great question. Great thing to bring up.
Yeah.
Cool.
Peace out.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. All right. So awesome questions or awesome topic to bring up. And also there were awesome questions there. I mean, really like the canard, and that's just what it is. The canard of, you pick your communist or previously communist country of the month to blame everything on. I mean, it's the same thing. Now here's one where you can prove it. Is not necessarily with cybersecurity or with cyber warfare, but with more traditional warfare. You got people talking about, North Korea is going to launch this missile. It could hit California. And then you get any, hell, you don't even have to get a physicist. Get a kid with a head for numbers, a third grader with a head for numbers and an Etch-a-Sketch, and they'll put it together and they'll show you, no, there's no way that missile's ever going to hit anything, outside of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, and then be lucky if they even have a targeting computer. And again, even when you look at that, you go, I mean, it's a classic scare tactic. The news wants to run with it. And then, but you can't say, like, if they don't even have a targeting computer, how the fuck are they doing like all these really high class cybersecurity attacks? I mean, you can't show us footage of North Koreans looking at a computer, staring at the screen with Google, on it, and they don't even know what to do with the search bar, and then say that, no, but these same people have just some of the brightest, hackers in history. I mean, give me a break. So, I get so tired of it. I mean, I know some people want to make the claim that say like China is actually backing, North Korea. North Korea is effectively, their claim would be that North Korea is a client state of China's actions, and they just use them as a patsy or something like that. Even that, you've got to prove a lot of things for that to be the case. I mean, there's got to be a lot. It's all supposition. It really is. I mean, you're reading tea leaves with a lot of this stuff. So, and why would you trust the United States government on anything? Like as far as what they say? Oh, unbelievable. So anyway, we got somebody in the YouTube chat late to the party. No worries. Woo, always, it's still a party, so all is well. Got a couple of preloaded questions that got asked under the comment. There is, let's see. Here's the first one. Oh, where'd it go? There we go. I just registered for classes to become a certified personal trainer. Any study tips? Well, hopefully, if you did go to be a personal trainer, which that's like a fitness trainer, I assume you mean, make sure that whatever organization you're going through, of course, is, what is that, NCCA certified, right? Or accredited, like the NASM, ACE, and so on. Those, you want to make sure, because most gyms, if it's not NCCA accredited, they're not going to care. So make sure it's one of those, because there are ones that aren't accredited in that way, like the AFAA, I think, and I think there might be a couple other ones out there that aren't. I don't know that I necessarily have any study tips as far as that goes. I'm honored by the question. I don't really know what exactly I could add into that. I mean, this is the hard thing with like personal training. I mean, if you're looking like, okay, well, what's like a great tact to have with personal training, and so on, even that, I don't know. I only know me. I mean, that's the thing. Like I'm really crazy about working out and all that. But I do kind of only know me, and I can only really speak for me, and I can tell you what I do, and maybe it'll work for you, or maybe I can look at you and see what's going on. And, I'll tell you one thing, like, I don't know exactly what these certification training programs look like, but if they ask you, something like, okay, what's the first question? Like if it's kind of open-ended and they're asking you, what's the first question you want to ask somebody that's coming in for personal training? Get saucy and get into that whole what do you want question. Like, what do you want to look like? And I think that could get really interesting, like I don't recall and I've dealt with personal trainers before, and they kind of broadly ask you about your goals, but I think you can go to a much deeper level with that. And then you could think, okay, what does a person want to get to this? And you got to be careful though. I don't know if you can crack the jokes like I do on the podcast where you can say, hey, look, if you just want to look good naked or, look good while you're fucking, this is what you want to work on. You want to make sure we get some arms in. You want to get some good hip thrusts and stuff like that. I don't think you want to do that because that could be, construed as like harassment of some kind. So do be careful with that. If you're going to recommend that to people. So yeah, I don't really have any study tips on that, but best of luck. I think that's tremendous. Big fan of, I think personal trainers are great overall. Again, it's not something, I've been doing this for a long time now. And so, I kind of know me and what works for me and what doesn't. So I don't really feel that I necessarily need a personal trainer, but who knows, maybe someday I'll change my mind and maybe I'll hire you. So there we go. Okay, let's get into, got another question here that got asked in. This is, somehow this always happens. I won't turn it into the whole thing, I promise. But someone asked a question of, about gaming. So, but I won't spend a ton of time on it. Like I said, I promise. So here we go. It's have you played/reviewed Far Cry Primal? I remember it being mentioned on the show, but couldn't remember if you actually reviewed. It's not a style of game I play, but looks awesome. So, okay, yeah, let's talk about this for a second, because there are actually some very unique things about this game. And the question asker, she's wonderful. So I'll gladly answer it. Anyway, Far Cry Primal is part of the Far Cry series, which is a first-person shooter series that's been going for, I guess, maybe over a decade now. In fact, they have a new one coming out in this month, in February, I believe. I think it's like New Wave, or it's something like that, or New Dawn, and it's like a post-apocalyptic game. Looks kind of interesting, kind of a melding of previous Far Cry games and Far Cry Primal. But anyway, Far Cry Primal takes place in literally the Stone Age, okay, in the Paleolithic. Like, that's the whole idea. You are, instead of using a machine gun and all this other stuff, you are using bow and arrow, club. You're a caveman. You're absolutely a caveman. It's a fascinating game with a fascinating premise, and I'm not necessarily one for first-person shooters either, but because this isn't so much about guns and boom, boom, and it's more about, like, ancient humanity, I can dig that, and I think that gives it a very unique feel. It's not the only game of that type. I'm trying to think. There's one that begins with, like, a Z that I can't remember off the top of my head. They made two of them that where you start off with fists and everything. But anyway, let me know, actually, if anyone's in the YouTube chat, let me know if the video and audio and everything's looking good, just because. Okay, no, it does look good. For some reason, my screen wasn't refreshing. I don't know why. So, all right, we're fine on that. Anyway, Far Cry Primal. So this game came out a few years ago. You're still going to hash out $50 for it, which I think is kind of crazy. But because it really has been out for a few years. I did eventually play it, and there's some interesting things in this. In fact, it might be really, at its time, the first AAA game to where you're just like, there's points where you're walking around in the game. And there's only a few as far as I know, but I encountered a couple pretty quickly where you looked at, especially at night, you look down on the ground and there's two people fucking, and you've got your torch and you look and there they are. The guy's on top of the gal, or the guy's like kind of behind the gal, and they're stooping away. I think that's great. I'm sure that's exactly how, or I'm sure not exactly, I'm sure that's kind of how things were going down back then. Maybe a little more quest for fire than Far Cry Primal, but the idea that the humans would just, in their leisure time, which they had significantly more than us, it would appear, in the Paleolithic age, based on some anthropologists, but they're just there fucking, and I don't know, I think it's I thought it was really cool when I saw it, but otherwise, the game is fairly basic. It is kind of mission based and all that, and there's nothing other than the setting. It's just your average Far Cry game. The setting, I think, makes it a little more palatable, certainly to me, and I do think it makes it kind of sexy, because I dig the idea of, eroticism in the Paleolithic. But yeah, again, there's not a whole lot to really say on that. It was good. It's just that it's really just a game that's very much skinned, right? Like, I other than the sex, which I think was kind of new at the time, like I don't think a AAA game had done that before. Other than seeing those moments of sex, you don't get to have sex. It's not like The Witcher, where you get to, get the fuck on, which would be great. But yeah, it doesn't allow for that. That could have been a little more interesting, maybe, if they allowed for that. I don't know, but then they'd probably be worried about rape claims and everything. And understandably, I'm not, insulting anything and saying such. So Yeah, it's just kind of a skinned game, but especially if you haven't played first-person shooters a lot, check it out. I mean, I thought it was fun. Let's see. Oh, someone says looks good to me. Question. Oh, yeah. Okay. Then someone said Xenoclash. That's it. I knew it began with a Z. Thank you. Yeah, Rob got me covered there. Xenoclash is there's two of them that they're like Far Cry Primal, where it's a kind of a first-person shooter that where it's set like in a Paleolithic kind of like caveman Stone Age thing. They reused the terrain from Far Cry 4 for Primal. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It felt very skinned. And I've played most of the other Far Cry games, and it did feel very, very just skinned over. So, I mean, but for what it is something different, and it's pretty cool. Let's get into another question here. Do you think it's safe to set Signal as your default messenger app? I know it has been a while, but there was that issue of text from non-Signal users not coming through. Thanks. Okay, yeah, so that was a thing years ago where if you can set on Android, you can set Signal as your default SMS client. Okay, as compared to using Android messages, which is what Google has Android come with automatically. Now, in the past, I recommended not doing that because there were times where Signal would seem to get confused. And if someone else wasn't also using Signal, they would not, you wouldn't be able to receive the SMS from them, even though it was just supposed to be SMS. As far as I can tell, Signal has cleaned that up. But here's kind of the issue with that, or here's sort of the rub. They have cleaned that up. And SMS is very much evolving. It's still probably the most used messaging platform in the world, but it is evolving where you're getting, RCS, which Google has implemented into, which is pretty much like rich text. It allows for you to do more with text messages, which Google has baked into Android messages. Also, the web client for Android messages is phenomenal. It's really, really great because if you use Signal for desktop, even though you have it set as your SMS client on your phone, you're not going to get your SMS messages in Signal for desktop. So I think there's still an advantage if you like. And look, folks, I mean, admittedly, I have the bias of I'm trying to get people a little more away from their phones and where their communication is mainly being done on a laptop where they have a little more control of things. Okay. That said, so I guess what I'm saying is that if you want to be able to do things on your desktop, Android messages is like the best SMS client for doing things on your desktop because you can just go to messages.android.com or messages.com and you can just pair up with your phone on that and it works so beautifully. So I don't know that I'd necessarily use Signal for that as well. I don't know that I'd still say, even though it seems like that problem where Signal was not receiving SMS messages has been cleared up. And I've tested this personally, just so you know. I mean, like I have messed with it. Even though that's been cleared up, I think there's still an advantage to just using Android messages. And understand that, Google is looking to make Android messages kind of their premier, this is a theory of mine, but that they are looking to finally make that the chat client. Okay. Like that's the one. So, like they're getting rid of Allo, they're getting rid of all these different things. I mean, they're going to have Duo as well, but Duo and Android messages, that's really what it seems like they're banking on these days. So it might not hurt to stick with Android messages, but to answer the question simply, there's no harm. If you're not interested in handling your SMS on your desktop, there's really no harm in it. I'll tell you something that does suck for handling SMS messages on desktop. The Your Phone app, that's just what it's called, Your Phone or Phone Companion, I think it is on an Android device that Microsoft has put out there, and it's called Your Phone on your desktop. That is fucking horrible. Like the way that syncs and how it automatically starts collecting photos and everything, it is a ugly bit of business. I was excited for it originally, but not anymore. I do not like how they have that set up. It's buggy as a bait store. I mean, it's really, really, really bad as far as that goes. Where, again, Android messages, it works beautifully as far as syncing SMS across desktop. But I know you weren't exactly asking that. But just to give that, kind of a full answer. There you go. So anyway, if you have any other questions on that, please feel free to ask them. All right. Now, something else I want to get into that I think is, whoa boy. Anyway, sorry, I just saw something on my screen. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but woo. Anyway. So something I want to tell you about, and this is kind of a prelude to an upcoming book review that I am going to be that I will be doing. And yeah, someone said, "Thank you for your answer. Awesome outfit." Yeah, I'm really crossing it here. Like, I have an Imperial hat. I have a Star Wars, I have the Galactic Empire symbol on my hat, which, by the way, the hat, that's like removable. It has a hook and loop, it has Velcro. So like I have a Cobra flag for, Cobra Commander that I could put on this hat if I wanted to. But then, underneath, if you didn't see all of it, here it is in glory on the video. I am wearing I have the symbol of Hyrule from Legend of Zelda on my t-shirt here. So anyway, makes for a great workout shirt and a great shirt to have. You can kind of see how the silver is all falling off of it. Anyway, that makes for terrible audio, so I'm going to stop talking about it, but thank you for the compliment. Okay. So something I'm going to give you a little preview, and I'm going to recommend something, and I'll put this out there if you want to read it before I actually do the review. Okay, because I am going to review like 3 books at once, but there's a purpose behind that. Actually, if I have my way, I'll end up reviewing 4 books at once. It's because it's going to be crazy. So I was introduced, not like physically introduced, because this person has been long dead. I guess since maybe the 1950s, or no, I'm sorry, maybe I guess the 1950s, maybe he died. But I was introduced to a author who is, and this goes, he's a science fiction author, or he gets classified as a science fiction author, but believe me, the ramifications go far beyond that. So pay attention. Okay. I was introduced to an author that Arthur C. Clarke, the great Arthur C. Clarke, of course, who wrote 2001 and all the books, in that series, wrote Childhood's End, whatever, Imperial Earth. I mean, like just a bunch of amazing books. Arthur C. Clarke said 2 of the books that this guy wrote that I'm about to tell you about are the greatest works of science fiction in history. Now, I mean, that's a big deal. Now, I mean, granted, how many people have said that about, Frank Herbert's works with Dune? Plenty, but like it's some pretty serious high praise. And when you look deeper into it, you find out just how many people give this guy some serious high praise. And these are books from the 1930s. And I've read 2 of them. I'm in the middle of a 3rd one. And I'll tell you, so the aforementioned Dune, in fact, someone asked me this just recently. They said, what's your favorite book? And I said, well, I got to go with Dune. It's so, I mean, I've been reading that since I was a teenager, and I've read it over and over again. I've read it many times. It's such an inspirational book. It's such like a deep book. I mean, there's so much going on there. I think one of these books specifically is actually better than Dune. And one of the things that made Dune so great was just how real, how well described, and how grand at the same time all of these planets and everything that's going on within the Dune universe is. I mean, it's fucking amazing. Like mind-blowing, frankly, how real the worlds of Dune are. But this guy takes the cake, and the author is, so enough of the tease. The author is a guy named Olaf Stapledon. Actually, his real name is William Olaf Stapledon, but OLAF and then Stapledon, STAPLEDON. If I think of it, I'll put a link in the show notes for it. This guy, who was it seems like a bit of, I mean, not necessarily an armchair philosopher, but a British guy, early part of the 20th century. And very much, I'm very high-minded, very high ideals that this guy was holding. He was actually a pacifist for a good long while. He would end up kind of supporting World War II, or stopping the Nazis and all that. Which, whatever. I know a lot of people fell for that one. We've talked about that in a recent Hangout, or not a Hangout Q&A, but in a recent Wednesday Q&A. But this guy wrote specifically 2 books that are considered just like masterpieces by a lot of people. The first one is his first book from 1930, which is The Last and First Men, a story of the near and far future. Now, he wrote a sequel to that. I haven't read that yet, but it's called Last Men in London. And that came out a couple of years after that. As far as I understand it, most people don't even read that book, and it's not as impressive. The other book that he wrote that is considered a masterpiece is called Star Maker, and this is the first one that I read. Now, this came out in 1937. These books, so Last and First Men, covers a time frame of 2 billion years, the entirety of, like, it's just covering humanity from stem to stern, and you end up with like these 18 different iterations of humanity. I mean, these books, and what's amazing is they're not like the longest books ever. Like Dune is infinitely longer than these books, but Dune doesn't play on the grand scale that these do, not even close. They're both of these books are written from like almost a first person perspective, which makes it impressive in itself. Like I dare say Star Maker is the greatest book ever written. I'm actually willing to say that. So if you needed any more reason to go read these, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's the biggest compliment I can give a book, because it's the greatest book ever. There is a lot of philosophy in these books. There's a lot of experimentation with different ideas, different ideals, different philosophies. And there's obviously science fiction, so there's a lot of science in it and everything. I don't want to give everything away right here, because I want to save a lot of it for a Patreon Q&A, or not a Q&A, but for a patron episode where I do a full review of these books. But Star Maker is basically the history of the universe from beginning to, I'm not going to exactly say the end, but something like that. And it covers billions and billions and billions and billions of years. Okay. You can just think of the old Carl Sagan quote, right? Billions and billions. I mean, it covers a dramatic amount of time. And the evolution that happens throughout it for humanity and through a lot of different ideas. In fact, just to give you a little bit of a hook, I was actually impressed that Star Maker, it was Last and First Men. I thought that really one of the first times that anything like polyamory was described in science fiction more belonged to Robert Heinlein, right? With like Stranger in a Strange Land. Oh, no. Olaf Stapledon was way ahead of that. He was way ahead on that whole concept. But of course, later on in the book, again, it's going through like all these different evolutions of mankind. Like I said, there's like 18 different versions that it ends up going through. It's pretty amazing. Now, I'll tell you, I think you should read Star Maker first. If you're going to do this before you hear my review, read Star Maker first, then read Last and First Men. Star Maker is effectively a sequel to Last and First Men, because there's things that happen in Last and First Men that actually get described in Star Maker. But Star Maker, because it's working on such a grand scale, it's not just dealing with humanity, it's dealing with like all other kinds of alien races. I mean, and ideas that, and look, I am somebody, you know me, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know how much science fiction I've consumed. And I heard ideas that I've never heard before. When I was listening to it on Audible, but, effectively when I was reading the book. I don't know how I missed this guy. I heard the name, I knew the name. I heard it at conventions and everything. But why nobody ever told me, say, Stallion, here, look, fucking read Star Maker already. What are you waiting for? Because, people did that a million times with other books. Like, I can remember when people came up to me with, like, Dan Simmons' Hyperion, and they said, no, Brian, you don't understand. You have to read this right now. And I'm glad they did, because Dan Simmons' work, that guy's one of the greatest writers ever. So you want to check out Olaf Stapledon's work. And like I said, start off with Star Maker, then do Last and First Men. It's amazing that I think I was going to hint at this earlier. They are kind of first person perspective. They're written like almost it's by a diarist. Okay. By somebody writing in a diary effectively. I don't know if all of Stapledon's work is like that, but so far every book I've read by him is written like that. And that's a little bit of a cheat. It's not exactly first person, which is maybe because I hate first person books. I read Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad. I knew I had to read that. I've done a lot of that stuff. But I don't know. I don't like that flavor. But when it's written from more of this like diarist, almost journalistic perspective, but it's first person, it seems to work. And I'm downright inspired by it, actually. And I'm amazed there aren't more people who write in this style. Of course, maybe they read Star Maker and they said, all right, well, this style's been done. It's over. Like, we can't do any better than this. And I sure as fuck would never claim that I could write anything like Star Maker. I don't think anyone else can. And I mean, it doesn't help that that Olaf Stapledon's kind of a mysterious guy. I mean, it's very weird stuff. Anyway, he came up with a lot of ideas way ahead of the curve. In fact, he coined even a lot of terms. Like, I think he might have even coined like concepts like genetic engineering, or like the terms, and there's a bunch of other ones. Anyway, I'll get into a lot more of it with my full review, but I just want to put it out there that, man, if you haven't read Olaf Stapledon, you need to get on that right now. And then, we can talk about it. Okay. Because you are in for one hell of a treat when you do it. I'm reading Odd John, which is another book, and it's actually a book he wrote in between Last and First Men and Star Maker. I don't know that they necessarily, like, if it fits in with that universe, but it's interesting because it's all about his, really, Stapledon's interpretation, I guess, of the Ubermensch. It's very much a Nietzschean book. And that's what's amazing with his work. A lot of his work is all about this, like, evolving to a higher form of being. And I'll be honest with you, that excites the fuck out of me. I mean, it really does. Like, I don't know. I read a lot of Stapledon and I'm like, yeah, well, I've thought about that, And so just tremendous. I really like, this is a name that I'd heard before, but now that I've read the work, it's a name I'm never going to forget. And they're books that I'm never going to forget. And really, I wish before my review, I'm going to do it pretty soon, but I would love to reread everything, before I did the review, because there's so much that happened. I don't think you can take it in all at once. It's really, really magical stuff. So definitely check out Olaf Stapledon if you have not. Feel free to get in questions in the YouTube live chat if you want. Or of course you can come into the Hangout if you would rather do that. But yeah, check out Olaf. Like I said, it unseated Dune. And I didn't think anything could ever do that, because you kind of get stuck in your ways, right? When you're a teenager, that's when I read Dune. And, when you start to like things as a teenager, often enough, you stick with those as like being the greatest ever. Like a movie that you saw when you were a teenager kind of sticks with you as like the greatest of all time. Maybe because, I don't know, you're reading it or watching it while you were getting a blowjob, and like your first blowjob, and you're like, holy shit, this is great. This is the greatest thing ever. And you attach it with a lot more memories. That certainly happens with music as well. But yeah, I didn't think anything would ever unseat Dune, but no, this does it, and I'm not the only one that thinks that way. I mean, obviously, if Arthur C. Clarke, even Brian Aldiss says that some of the best work ever. In fact, I see a lot of inspiration. I think a lot of science fiction authors really copied what Stapledon did, in the same way that, like, Forbidden Planet, the movie Forbidden Planet, I think that was the progenitor, the archetype for all science fiction TV series or movies afterwards, and even a lot of books. After, I think Star Maker is very much the Forbidden Planet of the book world. Okay, that's the point that I'm making. So anyway, you really, really got to get on that and read that. So, all right, see if I got any other preloaded questions here to get into, or like I said, feel free to ask them in the YouTube chat. We still got a few minutes yet to get into things, but oh man. Anyway, I'll just get a little comfortable here. Actually, I'll ask a question to the YouTube chat. How many of you use Wire? Any of you use Wire, the messenger? Like, I guess this is starting to take off again. It ended up getting open sourced, which I talked about that on Sovryn Tech. But I'll admit the one advantage I see it having, it's doing end-to-end encryption. It does the handshake. I reviewed it years ago. It does the handshake between the desktop client and the mobile client very well, where it's just like with Android messages or a Signal, where it's done with a QR code and you do the key handshake that way. Really, really brilliant. Okay, so one person in the YouTube chat says, first I've heard of it. Yeah, this is kind of I think a bit of a quiet, or a sleeping giant, I guess they would call it. A sleeping giant as far as messaging services go. Again, it is completely open source. It is using, the encryption for it has been vetted. I don't think it's regarded as highly as the, as a Signal protocol. But the one advantage I think it has is you actually don't need a phone number to use it. It works just about as well, and has most of the features, even has video calling and audio and messaging and all that stuff. But the big advantage is you don't need a phone number. You can just sign up for it with an email address. And that's kind of a huge deal. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily recommend everybody, hey, everybody jump over to Wire or something like that. But that's impressive that you can do it with just an email address, because it's something to think about. We were talking about Signal earlier. I am where, and I talked about my bias of, getting kind of past phones in a way. One of the problems with smartphones is that you really are beholden to, and you're going to pay the telcos for, you become, in a very real sense, you become slave to the telcos. And look, I pay for it too. So, pot kettle black. Okay. Like, I'm not saying I'm doing it, that I'm some kind of moral figure here. Okay. But you do become slave to the telcos. And like, particularly with Signal, if you lose your phone number, people can't contact you. I mean, they just can't. And that's a pretty serious flaw. Like, I got to admit, that's a really huge flaw. It was one of the reasons that I got very much into Briar, which was that the chat app that allowed for you that worked over Tor, but also allowed you to connect locally. And you didn't even you could use like Wi-Fi direct. You didn't even have to use Wi-Fi. You didn't have to have an internet connection to end up using it. And it totally relied on usernames. So you didn't even need an email to sign up for it. Now, there's challenges around that. You can't like back up your account, and you can't sync it with other devices and so on. But in many ways, I thought that was the right way to go. Of course, it drains your battery like there's no goddamn tomorrow. But again, it does so much right. So yeah, for Wire to allow it to work with just an email address and to work solely as a desktop client or as a mobile client, or sync between the two, there's an advantage there to where you're not using a phone number. Like, there's a very, very real advantage with that. Telegram, you can almost pull that off, but you do at some point have to give them a phone number. Like, you really can't get away from that. You could do it, you could have a dumb phone and use Telegram on your desktop. Sure. You could do that. Hell, I guess, well, you couldn't really do that with Signal. You could do that if you had a tablet. Maybe you could pull it off if you had a Chromebook, because Chromebooks can run the Signal. Well, they don't, I tested that on a Chromebook, and the Signal app didn't exactly work very well, but regardless, it's something you might want to look into if that's a concern that you have. And it's a concern that I have, that if I ever lost my phone number, I would lose a lot of important chat history, and I would lose encrypted, of course, but, and I would lose a lot of different communications. And that's a real issue. Which is why email is still king, right? Because it doesn't rely upon, it's its own little federated system. It doesn't rely upon any company really. Well, anyway, that's a whole other thing. Let me see what's going on here in the YouTube live chat. We got a few minutes left here. So let's see. It says, I think, or here we go. Oh, I just forgot that I've heard of it. Okay, yeah. So people have heard of it. Yeah, that's the thing. Again, people forget about Wire. I didn't really care to use it until a client wanted me to start using it. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I was impressed. It hasn't really changed much since when I last used it years ago. But it did come to mind for me. Oh yeah, this is one where you don't need a phone number. That's pretty nice. So something to consider. Anyway, got another one in YouTube live chat here. I think I downloaded Star Maker a long time ago, but never got around to reading it. Yeah, change that. Get on that now. It's fucking awesome. Like, it is such a huge book. In fact, I'll give you one thing that'll blow your mind. So again, that book was written in 1937. So TVs were just becoming a thing, like just barely video was a thing. All right. In that, they talk about how all communications, there's a point very early on in the book. Okay. So I'm not really spoiling anything, but they're talking about, kind of somewhat more, there are this other species kind of on almost a doppelganger planet, I guess, where to Earth. And on this planet, this industrial species, they communicate with little screens in their pockets that they pull out. Stapleton literally describes the smartphone in that thing. And he talks, and not only that, he doesn't just describe, this is the first thing when I started reading the book. At first, I'm like, oh no, it's first person. This is going to be a little rough. The opening kind of thoughts in it are really powerful, and were interesting. And so, that got me going for a bit, but once it got to this point, and it's only like two or three, maybe 4 chapters in, not even, but when he's describing this other planet, and that's a lot of what he does, is just like describes all these different cultures, civilizations, and planets. That's what Stapleton does in a lot of his books, really. But when he's describing it, he describes, like I said, how, yeah, I mean, basically it's a smartphone. It's a pocket screen that can communicate via radio, which, I mean, sure, you can call it Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but it's radio signal. And then he says he basically makes the argument that it controls their behavior, which is exactly what we've been saying on Sovryn Tech. And of course, Sovryn Tech's not the only one, but how like it was really, like it was this culturally controlling force. And I read that and I went, holy shit, this guy had it figured out in 37, that if everybody was walking around with something like that, that it would, it would take over their life, in a very real way. And my mind was fucking blown, like when I read that part of Star Maker. So if that's a little more of a tease to get you to read this shit, do so, because I mean this is next level, higher level thinking. I don't think Stapleton was ever an anarchist, but he was that close, really, to getting there. Okay, let's see. We got another question in the YouTube live chat. Are you still a fan on that Line Messenger app? Well, some interesting news about Line Messenger, actually. The news is that there is going to be Line, the company Line, which is huge in Japan, like many things. And it's a Japanese company, and it's a Japanese messaging app, even though it's available around the world, and very full featured, has every feature you could want, even has encrypted messaging, even though the encryption, how good it is, that's up to debate. But they have partnered with Nintendo to this summer. They are going to release, I think it's called Dr. Mario World, for mobile platforms, for iOS and Android. And yeah, Dr. Mario World, this just got announced today as of this recording. This is wow. So I mean, Line's, you partner with Nintendo, you're going to do money. Like, I mean, there's no question there. I don't know if it's going to get a bunch of people to join the Line Messenger app with Dr. Mario, because I mean, as soon as I read there's going to be a new Dr. Mario game, of course, my ears perk up, because it might not be my favorite Nintendo game, but it's easily in the top 5 as far as like any Nintendo franchise or game series or property. I love Dr. Mario. I'm crazy about it. Play it a lot. Okay. So now, granted, with Dr. Mario World and it being on a touch screen, I don't know how well that's going to work, because that's a game that's really requires precision controls, right? I mean, it really, really does. And it's been around since the NES, and, I even have a version on the 3DS and so on. They've come out with one for almost every major system. It's not a bad idea to have come out for mobile, but I do worry about the controls for that. Anyway, Line Messenger, I still like it. It is a genuine Facebook alternative. It is, used around the world. Obviously, the most popular in Asia, but it is used around the world. It is feature rich. There's no reason that it shouldn't be used in comparison to all of the other platforms out there, because I think actually it has more features than just about any of them. So I still like it a lot. I just don't use it because I can't find anyone else really. It's the network effect, right? No one else really uses it. And I've tried many times with, just sheer force of personality to try to get people onto other platforms, and it just never ends up really working out well. So I've sort of given up on that. Not entirely yet, but I've sort of given up on that. But then I'd be revealing my hand if I talked about much more. So I still think Line Messenger is great. But I guess, I don't know. Hopefully, I really do hope that with Dr. Mario World coming out this summer in America, because it's going to get a release in Japan and America. Yeah, the person says in the YouTube chat that they were there for a bit, and I know you were. Some people went there with me, and that was great, but it just wasn't like the numbers that. To where it would remain viable to stick there. So, and believe me, I've tried so many times to like stick with something for years and just keep going with it. And, after a couple of years or something, I mean, you got to let it go. So anyway, I'm hopeful that Dr. Mario World, I actually would really like it if it got more people interested in Line Messenger, and maybe they got away from Facebook entirely, but I don't know that that's going to necessarily happen either. Then the person says RIP Quitter.no. Yeah, that was another platform that we tried for. Great platform. Had a great relationship with the person running it and everything. It was a real shame that didn't necessarily take off, but I know this person also got on there as well. So Anyway, yeah, Line Messenger, awesome. We'll see what happens really this summer. It might end up taking off, and if it does, I'm not opposed to using Line Messenger. I'm really not, because who knows? Might have to visit Japan again soon, you know. So, and you got to understand, when you go to Japan, it's just like WeChat in China. You can't get around China without WeChat. I mean, WeChat is the fucking internet in China, okay? And Line Messenger in Japan is very much the same deal. Line Messenger is absolutely the internet there. I mean, that's how you like hail a taxi. It's how you do all kinds of things over there. So, you know, it's, if you do travel around the world, I mean, that's very much a thing. You know, I will end off with this. We got to wrap this baby up, but I will end off with this. There has been talk. I don't know if I'm going to end up being able to get into it on a Sovryn Tech Prime episode, but there has been or it's been announced. I don't think it's just been like, I don't think it's rumor that Facebook is looking to make a unified messaging platform where basically if you have, you know, an account on any one of their properties, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, you know, whatever it is, you can message, say you're using Instagram and the person you're trying to contact is using Facebook Messenger. You can use direct message in Instagram, which is a feature of Instagram, and you can message somebody on Facebook Messenger through that. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons. One is that they say they're going to bake in WeChat's end-to-end encryption into that, which means that it's going to, like, every Facebook Messenger, Instagram direct messages, WhatsApp, and whatever else they've got are by default going to use the Signal protocol to encrypt their messages. Now, that's not to say that Facebook is implementing it the best, but that is interesting that you will be able to communicate across all these things, and it's all going to be end-to-end encrypted by default. That said, the interesting thing with this is that this could be the thing that finally kills Facebook. Or that kills not Facebook the company, but Facebook.com. Because if people can just communicate with someone on Messenger or with any other, or, you know, just using WhatsApp or, you know, whichever Facebook property, like, I think one of the main things that keep people having a Facebook account is Facebook Messenger, because it's very much become the phone book of the internet, or, you know, the phone book, the modern phone book, I should say, not the phone book of the internet. That's, you know, that's the DNS system, but you know, the modern phone book is really Facebook Messenger, or Twitter kind of owns that too. But the ability to not, if you didn't have to install Messenger, but you could still contact people on Messenger, I bet a lot of people would uninstall Messenger finally, and that might happen. So I wonder how they're going to react to that, because they had big plans for what Facebook Messenger was going to do, because they know that the news feed of Facebook is dying. Like, they have to know that that's going away, and it's causing so many problems. And I mean, there's so much horseshit going on. You know, there's the teenagers getting paid to use a Facebook VPN that's collecting their data story. I mean, it's getting so bad. Someone said in the YouTube live chat, message across platforms, just install our rootkit. Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh man, I mean, in that story, you know, we didn't even get into that story about how Apple cut off Facebook's ability to like sideload apps onto iOS, and it ended up fucking with Facebook the company, and like you know, people within the company could, if they had an iPhone, they couldn't use like a lot of the internal apps for Facebook the company proper. Crazy shit. We might get into it in Sovryn Tech Prime either this week or next week, but yeah, I mean, any Facebook app is effectively a rootkit. You're totally right. Just like the Google Play Store is. But anyway, all right. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. The messaging, you know, platforms, this is definitely a battle that is still going on, you know. Maybe I still think there's still a battle going on with web browsers. Like, I don't think that Chrome is exactly one. In fact, I think they're making moves that we talked about on the recent Wednesday Q&A, where they're going to push a certain segment of the population away. Okay. And so I don't think the browser wars are over, but I'll tell you, the messaging wars sure as hell aren't over. I mean, not even close. You know, Google can't get it licked, but they keep trying. You know, Facebook seems to see this need for a unified messaging platform. It's it's interesting what's happening. And Telegram is coming out with crazy updates all the time. In fact, the latest Telegram update, version 5.3, I think that just came out today or yesterday, Pavel Durov, the head of Telegram, he had some nasty words for Apple because Apple wouldn't put out the update, I guess, again, which we ran into that previously. And he like Pavel Durov said, yeah, as soon as the people in Cupertino wake up, maybe you'll get your update, iOS users. And I was like, wow, that's harsh. This is really fucking harsh, but I liked it. Whatever. I mean, fuck them all. Okay. Fuck iOS. Fuck all of them. Or, fuck Android. I mean, forget it. But anyway, so looks like I just got a Telegram contact. Actually, I do. Those are like my main two are Signal and Telegram. I use those pretty much all the time. So anyway, okay. Well, there it is. Yeah. Fuck all the tech giants. That's a great way to end anything Sovryn Tech related. Cause I'm not just going to pick on Apple. Fuck Google too, and yeah, we'll leave it with that. So, all right, that's it for your Wednesday Q&A. Thank you to everyone that took part in it. A lot of very interesting conversations that we had. I think the video just cut out. So I think that's my cue. I will see all of you on the other side.